My expectation today is really about how do we together make a better world. And I could not think of a better person to interview, to get started than Nancy Pfund. And so that you know, she's from DBL, which is a venture capital firm. And our second investment at TDK Ventures was with DBL. Nancy, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Nicolas. Thanks.
I'm sure everyone read your bios. They know how amazing and exceptional and awarded person you are. But what I love about you is that you're really clear about this double bottom line, which is a DBL for the name of your firm. And what I really appreciate is that you've done that for 21 years now, but that was part of your whole life. I saw some of your interviews where you talked about your upbringing and how social good was important for you. And the reason why I wanted you to speak to our panel is clearly portfolio companies care about it, but TDK deeply cares about doing good while doing well. And so if you could speak a little bit about why this doing good is so important to do well.
Well, absolutely, my favorite subject, so this won't be hard. First, I just want to thank you for not only inviting me to this morning, but for this amazing organization, and you can feel the energy in the room and making the effort to build community. That's so important to what we do. So many times we're in the trenches, and to come together as a community really strengthens all of us and inspires us all. So thank you for what you do. Yeah, so delivering social returns at the same time that you deliver strong financial returns to your investors is what DBL is all about. And it, over 20 years in, as Nicolas mentioned, it seems kind of old hat now because we've been doing it so long, and we've been fortunate to work with entrepreneurs. We had the blank canvas, and they painted the image of what those two bottom lines working together could be. Obviously, we can't do that without entrepreneurs that are all in. And so, in our early days, working with companies like Tesla and Solar City and Nextracker and Pandora, a non-climate one, we really were able to prove our model. But if you go back to the early days, sort of why do this? It was very controversial in those early days, and people felt if you introduced a social goal into your investing, your returns would just not be attractive, and that you had to just focus on financial aspects. And so that was the common view back then. Some people still have that view, but obviously climate and impact investing have arrived on center stage. So why is that? It's because people really want to build a great company, but they want to change the world. They want to show their community, their children, their families, their friends, that even future generations know that a certain company and industry was able to improve the lives of people across the globe, and of course help save our planet for future generations. So that is what turns a career into a calling, and makes it so that even someone like me that's been doing this for over 20 years, every day I wake up and it feels like, wow, we're just getting started, because it's so much more than just going into the office. And I know that you all feel that way in your own entrepreneurial efforts. I would say that what helped me to express this was a combination, as always, necessity is the mother of invention. I had always been interested through my parents in social and environmental causes. I'd worked for the Sierra Club the day after I graduated from college in Washington, D.C., learned a lot about that, worked at Stanford Medical School. So I kind of had that connection to social and environmental and medical or health-related causes. But then I wanted to learn the basics of business and did so, and was just able to, over the course of my career, interstitiate and allow elements of my sort of idealistic self to infuse into my job, sometimes very little. So when I worked at Intel, I thought, well, I'm communicating about semiconductors. I was in marketing and communications. But all of a sudden, the founder of Intel said, you know what, we have this issue about the health of the semiconductor industry at the time competing against Japan, and that was one of the founders, Bob Noyce, and he said, help me do this. They didn't have a government affairs, they didn't have speech writers, it was mainly engineers, and I was clearly not one of those. And so that, even though it was a very traditional company, I did a traditional work. And I guess that was something I mined along the way that allowed me, when I had been at JP Morgan, where I landed because our company, Hamilton Quist, which was San Francisco based, was acquired by JP Morgan, a banker and a VC investor to the first generation of tech companies. We brought Apple public, for example. We were acquired by JP Morgan after we had gone public, and it was just very different than being in a boutique San Francisco-based company. I said, I don't want to go to New York all the time. I had young children. And so I was open to new ideas. And that new idea was to help the Bay Area Council, a regional group here that's actually now housed in that Klamath, the boat, on just down the street on the Embarcadero. They wanted to make job creation relevant to people that couldn't work in a tech company. That the Bay Area, a lot of neighborhoods were being left behind as the tech and internet boom hit this region, and so they wanted people to pay attention to creating companies that would help these neighborhoods that were being left behind, help people that couldn't get a job at Hewlett-Packard or Intel or whatever. And so that appealed to me. And it also, I figured, because I was still nurturing that environmental interest, I understood that there were the beginnings of some environmental companies here, and they could actually keep jobs here that were not for the people that went to work at Google or tech companies. They were different kinds of jobs. And so that was kind of the spark that turned me from saying it's impossible to do this, what the Bay Area Council wants to, create jobs in Oakland or jobs for people that don't have engineering degrees. Turned that from a no, I don't think I can, to a yes, I can. And it was really that environmental, very inchoate at the time, but that environmental activity in the region that gave me the confidence to ditch everything else and try this. And then over 20 years in, almost 25 actually, we are still doing that.
So I want to talk about two TDK principles. One is courage, one is vision. Just to set a context of when you started TBL, 2004, that was a dot-com crash. And you come with this idea of, I'm going to make money, but I'm going to do good, which probably was not what your LPs, your investors wanted to hear. Can you talk about how did you manage to go and persevere? So the courage part and the vision that you had no proof point at the time. You were just starting. So how did you go about it? Because I want the entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs in the room to really hear that from you.
Sure. And I'm sure you lived this as I did back then, and it's intense. It was not only had the dot-com peaked and crashed by 2000, and we actually started raising in the 2001, 2002. It took us a long time. So we were right. I mean, no one wanted to invest in traditional venture capital anymore because they had lost all this money in the crash, let alone this sort of do-gooder venture capital. This person comes in and says, we're going to make you great returns, but also drive improvement in the Bay Area. I mean, people were like, thanks, but no thanks. I mean, I'm just hemorrhaging in my portfolio, so good luck. So what we had to do was, and this is very common in startups, we had to stitch together a constituency that actually cared about what we were doing. And we kind of finally figured out that while it was a small group, it was a mighty group, and we were able to get to our 75 million. And that was, and it was very atraditional in terms of what an LP base looks like. We went on to have more traditional LPs, but in those first days, it turned out that foundations like Ford, MacArthur, Annie E. Casey, they were really interested in what we were doing. They wouldn't invest from their endowments because it was just, the endowments were protecting the corpus of the foundation, and this was way too risky. But they did it from their grant-making organizations, where they had some flexibility to take a small amount of their grant dollars and put it into something like this. And so, those are they didn't write big checks, but those are very esteemed, well-known names. So it gave people comfort that, wow, some people that know what they're doing on the social side are backing this. And then on the financial side, because we wanted to lift up neighborhoods by investing in the neighborhoods that had not received the benefits of entrepreneurial activity, spread those benefits, we qualified, and I didn't even know what this was at the time. There's something called the Community Reinvestment Act that banks had to really follow and make investments in low-income neighborhoods for reasons that I won't go into, sort of just historically. And that is how a lot of our low-income housing got built over the past many decades. They did a lot of housing. At the time, they didn't do a lot of job creation, even though that was in their mandate. So we mined that little unexplored vein, and said, wow, our fund will complement your housing funds because people need a place to live for sure, but they also need a job to pay the rent. And so that brought us into a world that was very obscure at the time, had a lot of regulations around it, but it was all we could do, and they were big names. I mean, we got Wells Fargo, we got Citibank, we got J.P. Morgan. I mean, so this was a thing, and no one had ever brought those worlds together before. And so many efforts later, we just crawled to that 75 million goal that we had. I think we ended up at 76. And that was enough to get started. And each successive fund, we weren't able to really build from Fund 1 to Fund 2 because of the 2008 crash, but we had enough, by that time we had enough momentum in the portfolio and the impact investing world was becoming more well-known, so we were able to get that done.
So this is for the context. Now let's talk about today. Mm-hmm. And let's start with climate, which is clearly a place you've invested heavily and you've done extremely well. And we can see communities suffering. The climate is not getting any better. There's a challenge of affordability. In the news, we see a lot of hyperscalers being cancelled as projects because the communities are pushing back. The cost of energy is becoming higher because of AI, which no one wants, on top of losing their jobs to AI fear. How do you think about this climate context today?
It is definitely fraught. There are dynamics here that didn't exist when we started, and that is, as you correctly point out, the devastation that we're seeing from climate. We thought we would solve everything back in the early 2000s, that we wouldn't need adaptation, we wouldn't need resilience. Well, of course, unfortunately, we were wrong. And I notice you have Max Brody speaking tomorrow. That's one of our portfolio companies. He grew up in Canada, witnessed a fire when he was 12 years old, and now he's developing an autonomous helicopter company that has an AI layer to put out fires autonomously before they spread. So, the devastation on one side, the ability of technology to change the game, eliminate the drought of innovation that we've seen. That movie we've seen before, and it's happening here. So that gives us hope. The issues in data centers, every day it seems like there's another challenge to the water quality or the electricity bills or lack of electricity that are caused. So we're going to figure that out. I do think that it requires, and this has always been the case with climate investing, you've got to reach beyond your narrow group or your conceptualization of who your stakeholders are. Because if you have a great storage or AI layer that makes data centers more efficient and allows them to use less energy, for example, or you have solar and storage that you can put next to data centers, that sounds great, but there's always going to be some group that feels they haven't been involved in the decision. And rightly or wrongly, I mean, I'm no judgment here, but it doesn't matter who's right and who's wrong. You have to involve that broader population. And we did that in the early days of solar. You have to go to the solar owners, the rooftop solar owners, go to the community groups, go to the advocacy groups. Now it's just that playbook needs to be brushed off and made even more sophisticated with some of the tools we have today that we didn't. So working with the local communities, offsets are a great way to build health and safety and track the local acceptance of data centers. There are a lot of data centers going in Arkansas, for example, which is rural and very poor. We have a company called Chestnut Carbon that did a big deal with Microsoft, 7 million tons of carbon they're going to store by planting trees and measuring the outcomes, creating biodiversity, improving water quality, all kinds of ancillary effects, but it's really a carbon removal deal. And JP Morgan just did a project finance funding for it to the tune of 210 million, which has never happened before in the natural climate solutions space. So we're making this progress. But we can do for hyperscalers in Arkansas and other places is show that we realize that the community needs jobs, it needs clean air, it needs clean water, it needs places to hunt and fish in the case of Arkansas, and wrap our carbon solution around that, work with the chambers of commerce, work with the forester groups, and build that coalition. And so my advice to folks when they're facing these, it's such a fractured time, is build your base and take a very broad view of who should be in your inner circle.
I want to double click on this. It's beyond awareness of the stakeholders. It's a respect and an engagement with all the stakeholders who may have an opinion, who may be able to push back. You have a good example from one of your portfolio that did that extremely well.
Yeah. Well, I'll go back just because I know people like Tesla stories and Solar City. Elon Musk was the chairman of Solar City, which was one of the large rooftop solar companies that was eventually sold to Tesla, and they were all cousins, so it was kind of a family affair. But one day at a board meeting, we were talking, and the Public Utilities Commissions, many of you know, are very important to setting the regulations for solar in terms of what you can do, how much it costs, what kind of incentives. And so we had heard that and we were down in San Mateo, we had heard that Arizona's Public Utilities Commission was meeting later that week, and they were going to put some policies in place or propose some policies that would basically kill the rooftop solar industry. And so we're talking about it, and I don't remember, someone said, well, we're going to write an email and say this is not right, this will kill jobs, blah, blah, blah. And I remember saying, that's good, but in these kinds of situations where the consequences are so dire and there are so many stakeholders, we got to show up. And immediately around that board table, and Elon was one of the ringmasters, said, okay, let's go there. We didn't call it a demonstration, we called it like a solar fair. Right outside the Public Utilities Commission. You could also sign up to make 2-minute testimonials in front of the commission. And so sure enough, I don't know how they did it, but in one day, they organized a party outside of the Public Utilities Commission with all the different advocacy groups, homeowners, unions, I think were there. And then inside we had people make their comments. So we shifted that policy, and it was done in a matter of hours, really.
By listening to each other, meeting face to face.
Yeah, and trusting that while back then, Elon, very different than now, Elon had no real public policy, zeal. He knew that, folks around the table, including myself, had kind of played in that world, and was just, we all were able to make a snap decision, and we're so committed, knew how important this was, because it's a domino effect. If Arizona does it, then Nevada does it. I mean, it's kind of you had to really address it on a case by case basis. So that's a happy example.
Yeah, no, it's really good, because it's easy to assume that these commissions are hostile and they have intent which are against ours. But actually, just talking to them, explaining what you're trying to do, trying to find commonalities is what shifted completely.
Yeah, and that's a little harder to do now. And as we all know, the regulations, at least here in California, are not as favorable to rooftop solar. It's still a huge market. So that's another lesson. You're not going to win every battle, but if you show up and you win a few, you live to fight another day.
Yeah. Now, we talk regulation, so let's move to geopolitics. Clearly, we are in a highly complex geopolitical system that gets even more bipolar or tripolar, more complex. It challenged all of us in the room. All these challenges, how do you see it as potential opportunities?
Yeah, it's something that it's difficult because it changes so. I mean, if you want to beat the tariff game, how do you do that? Because it changes so much. But certainly, bringing home your manufacturing and supply chain to the extent you can is something that we're seeing a lot more of, and is very good on the double bottom line too. We have a company called Fiber Global that's, instead of using timber for kind of low-end furniture, wood, is recycling boxes. That's where they're starting. They're going to do make all kinds of woods. Has the same tensile strength, etc. It's a former Tesla manufacturing guy. And he's in the plants are in Indiana. They're creating jobs. They're connected to their community. That happens to be where a lot of the furniture industry is located, in that Midwest area. So the transportation is easy, and so that's a very smart move on his part on many levels. In terms of the geopolitics, we try to be sensitive to the fact that Europe has this natural gas problem, and so in terms of Russia and the supply chain, the supply pipelines and such. So one of our companies, called Bellwether Coffee, which switches the roasting of coffee from natural gas, big facilities, which is how 99% of coffee is roasted, to sleek shop roasters that can actually fit on a counter in a cafe. Ventless, no particulates, take out about 87% of the carbon of coffee roasting. So all the coffee you're drinking is actually kind of a cup of carbon. So we do need to do something about it.
Now everyone feels bad.
I know.
Except me.
There you go. But they're Bellwether Coffee roasters throughout the Bay Area, so happy to connect you there. But anyway, we're seeing huge uptake in Europe because it allows cafes to control their own destiny relating to the way their coffee gets roasted, and not as dependent on natural gas. So these are the little geopolitical tweaks or changes that are happening, and many of them are negative, but that's an example where, we are thriving because, not just because of the issue, it's around geopolitical energy supply. The coffee tastes better when it's roasted freshly, it's cheaper, so it has all of that. No sacrifice approach that we think is very winning. But it's, you try to weave your way through and find places where you are able to be successful. The company that Max runs, Rain, that you'll hear about tomorrow, I call it our swords to plowshares investment, because it's taking these the first implementation of autonomous firefighting is with the Black Hawk, the autonomous Black Hawk that Sikorsky, a division of Lockheed Martin, makes, because DARPA many years ago funded the program to make it autonomous, and then now RAIN layers on how to fight a wildfire on top of that. And so in terms of the help we're getting, DARPA which is, you think of as a military technology, is now migrating into some of these civilian areas. So, and I'm not sure that would have happened a few years ago. I think it wasn't as obvious how some of these military investments could also build civilian safety or prosperity. So again, I'm not saying it's easy, but there are ways to navigate and to make sure that if there is a way to benefit from some of this turmoil, you give it a try.
Yeah. I like your coffee example, because there are many times you can have a better product while being more sustainable. And many in the room are working on that. This is a false choice to think that it will have to be a less good product to be more sustainable.
And that's our motto. I mean, it's a no sacrifice approach.
Yep.
You're not going to build a big company if the product isn't better, cheaper, faster, and it's sustainable,
Yep.
not or.
Yeah. Now, we talked about climate, we talked about geopolitics. There's something which is interrelated, which is politics. And there's huge movements that are happening right now. And I like your stakeholders concept and being aware of the stakeholders. How do you see that aperture improving, or at least helping us in the room to take opportunities that are the right one to take?
Well, I will give an example. That company I mentioned a few minutes ago, Chestnut Carbon, that's planting trees for the Microsofts of the world to get the carbon removal and get the credits. That is a deal that could not have happened even a few years ago, and it's because it was hatched as part of a company called Kimmeridge, which is a very well-known traditional oil and gas LNG developer. And the founder, Ben Dell, he said, I want to offset my projects. And he couldn't find an offset that he likes, so he started Chestnut. And now it's becoming independent of Kimmeridge, but he's very involved. And so all of the knowledge about project finance, building LNG terminals, pipelines, natural gas plants, all that expertise is being applied to afforestation and forest management, and the sophistication of how do you finance it. And so it's taken what was a very more niche-y and more idealistic kind of a sector, and given it superpowers, the superpowers of oil and gas. And so my message in that is, and I'm not sure I would have been in the mood, 5 years ago to partner up with an oil and gas developer. I mean, just because our whole development had been very siloed from that, and sometimes we felt that we were opposed to them, for reasons that are well known. So it took our team opening up to the idea that maybe collaboration in this day and age, as opposed to more antagonistic relationships. Maybe we can go beyond sort of being enemies or being frenemies or whatever we were, and actually find ways of collaborating, finding points where the 1 + 1 is more than 2. And so I would really urge people to just think about that and see if they can take that collaboration to a new level. I would also say that language is important, and now climate change, global warming, not that we don't want to use that language, because that those are accurate terms. I would just say that to reach across to constituencies that are not as supportive in Washington or anyway. I made a list of some of the words we use, and we've always done this. Like, you have to dress it up. So I thought of resilience, affordability, collaboration, jobs, health and safety, quality, and security. I mean, that was just. I mean, there are others, but you can. That's. I was an anthropology major, so I kind of understand that language is super important to breaking down cultural barriers, and so just do it. I mean, we did that with solar energy. We kind of figured, oh, hey, we're creating a lot of jobs. Why don't we tell Mr. or Ms. Republican governor how many jobs we're creating as opposed to how much electricity we're generating? And that was the language that they understood.
We have a number of portfolio companies that quickly change their website, change the narrative, same product, but the narrative was different.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've met some of the very best entrepreneurs in the world. What would be your actionable guidance to them in the room about how to go through all these challenges we talked about, climate, geopolitics, politics, stakeholder management? What would be your advice in the context of today to build the tomorrow's better?
Sure. Well, I mean, you always hear you need the grit, you need the leadership, you need the team. I mean, all of those are super important. I mean, you need to play the long game in times like this, and understand that the pendulum does swing, and certainly in climate we're dizzy because it's swung so much over the past few decades.
Right?
Yeah. But we always make progress, and one of the things you have to do is pick yourself up. The inevitable, your cash balance is almost zero, or you lost a customer, or the product didn't work and it's beta. I mean, those happen, and it's not personal, it's not you, it's just part of the process. And so you just have to have that notion and support structure to pick yourself up. And if you need to pivot, you pivot. I mean, as you mentioned, change your language. And know that, and yet you need to celebrate the small wins, because it's only through the small steps, getting through those, that you'll get to the leaps of progress, of impact. And I think sometimes people think it's all leaps, and yet it's really small things. One company we have not in the direct climate space called Spatial, which is doing a big product announcement next week. It started as a high fidelity sound company, using sound objects and moving them around, so that, like, if we wanted this to be a party about Africa wildlife, over you would be the sounds of elephant hooves, and then there would be a giraffe here, and you could just do it on your iPhone, and very high quality and much cheaper than Meyer sound, or and supplemental to sort of the Dolbys of the world. Great idea. COVID hit. No one was traveling. You can't convey high quality, cheap sound.
No.
Without being there. I mean, it's like, it's as good as your iPhone or whatever it is you're listening to. So really depths of despair. The company was located across the street from Pixar. I don't know if I never asked the founders, is that how they thought of it? But they said, you know what, these objects could be made, these sound objects could be visual, could be used in 3D immersive kind of developments. And with remote teams, so that you could all, the team in Germany, the team in Silicon Valley developing the inside of the next car, would be able to take these objects and collaborate. And there's a whole organization now that NVIDIA and Pixar and others started, open system 3D development. And so they decided, well, let's join that. And they were like the only startup. They developed the technology because they had, during COVID, no one was doing anything with their original technology except a few kind of ultra high net worth people that wanted the system in their homes. And sure enough, they worked it, And meanwhile, the whole Vision Pro, the whole immersive 3D environment, people spending billions on that became a thing. And so at the Apple Developers Day a few months ago, they were featured. One of the vice presidents mentioned how they're using this technology, and next week there'll be some other big announcements from leaders in this space. And so we went from literally wondering if we should shut the doors to being part of a whole new technological trend that has a lot of heft to it.
Thank you, Nancy. I think the golden nugget of playing the long game with the current situation, celebrating the small wins, I think it's a really good way to end this panel. I want to thank you, and I want to tell everyone that Nancy agreed to kindly stay during the networking event. So if you want to continue the conversation with her, she's willing to be with us 20 more minutes at least.
Oh, sure.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.